Hello, it's Tuesday afternoon and you're with Lynn Brown in BridgeLab. And today we're going to talk about virtual interviews. And in a way, that's kind of what's happening right now. You're seeing me on Zoom, which is probably the most common format. And I want to tell you that to do this little short recording, I'm standing up. And it might seem kind of funny, but most of the experts say that when you're standing, you actually can project a little better and you appear a little more relaxed than if you're sitting at the table. The experts that I've been talking to and watching on webinars assure me that Zoom interviewing is something that you can practice and get a lot better at. And of course, we've all been using technology, Zoom, Skype, and FaceTime to interact with people during the last 3 or 4 weeks. So we're all probably getting better at it. But one of the things we're pretty sure about is that virtual interviews are probably going to be here to stay for the foreseeable future. And that's because they just are more efficient and they cost less than people traveling around to interview. So get comfortable with it, practice, and I'm going to give you a few tips in this session, but I'm also going to attach a best practices sort of cheat sheet for you. I don't do a particularly great job of making my background neutral. Both my husband and I are working at home, as many people are. And so I have the upstairs and he has the downstairs, but there's definitely some crossover. But I'm doing the best I can to kind of control the environment for Zoom calls or little videos like this. There's a lot of good reasons to take one more step in terms of controlling your environment. That can be as simple as turning off your phone. It can be making sure that your door is locked and your neighbor doesn't walk in, or your dog doesn't go on a barking spree, or your kid doesn't jump in the middle of the interview. All these things happen and we do our best to control it. Sometimes there's really strange loud noises as people do a lot of gardening. There's not a lot you can do to control that, but find the most controlled environment to have your interview. And one of the funny things that was talked about in one of the webinars I attended is that a person was interviewed while sitting on her bed. And while we of course do that with friends and family, it's not considered a particularly professional setting. So keep that in mind. This is a funny one, but dress as if you are in the room with the person. And we've seen some funny little samples of someone looking pretty sharp, dressed appropriately for the interview, and then something unforeseen happens and they have to go take care of something and they get up in their pajamas on the bottom. So think about the unforeseen things happening. One of the things I strongly suggest is that you write out some questions that are likely to be asked. And here's the big one. Tell us about yourself. Probably over 50% of interviews will start with a question like that. And I'd like to just remind you that that question is exactly the same as what we call our elevator pitch. So it's a 30-second brief overview of the things that are important for them to know about you. And they should be closely related to the job, and they should highlight your skills, your abilities, and your qualifications in a very succinct way. That's again another something that you can practice and get really good at. I was going to tell you about my standing desk real quick. This is not really a standing desk. It is a produce box flipped over on the top of my desk. And that gives me a lot of options, but you can improvise really simple things to be successful in your interviews. There's another question you might kind of think about and write out. What do you imagine you'll be doing in 5 years? Now, why is this important? Well, it's kind of a tricky question because on one hand, they want to know that you have goals and dreams and that you're going to be continually growing, but they're kind of wanting to also mine for information. Are you planning to leave the area? Are you planning a big pivot going back to graduate school or something like that? So think about what you want to communicate in lieu of the job posting. I have a couple other ones that might be fun to think about. Describe your most creative work-related project that you've done in the past year. And since all of you are so creative, I'm sure you'll come up with some great examples. And this is a good one because it can kind of jog your memory. Give an example of when you involved others in making a decision. Now, that's important because of that so-called teamwork concept. They're kind of looking for, well, do you work well by yourself or in a team? And they may actually ask you that question directly, but this is a sneaky way to get into it. Behavioral questions are an art form, and if you're interested, I have a exhaustive list of them and I can send them to you. Got a couple other things for you. It's okay to have a pen and a piece of paper, and you let the person interviewing know that you may take a few notes so they don't think you just are distracted. This is a hard one for me, and I'm trying to really do it in this example, but look at the camera. There's something that feels a lot more like eye contact if you're looking directly at the camera. Most of us tend to look down toward our keyboard or our desk, but keep your eyes up if you can. This happens more than you think. You probably have had this experience, but if technology fails, be calm and do something very quickly, which is reconnect with the interviewers. Demonstrate that you are calm in an emergency and that you know your technology well enough to either phone in or reinitiate, send an email, but just do it very calmly and quickly. It's really nice to use the screen share option in the Zoom interviews so that if they ask you a question and you have a great example that you can pull from your desktop or some easy thing, they can then have that experience of visually connecting with that image, and they can also see that you're very technology savvy. Again, that's important. As part of your interview prep, make sure you have some very engaging questions to ask the interviews. And this is actually a psychological thing somewhat, because if you ask really good engaging questions, they get out of the sort of interrogator mode and actually are more open to you. And it's very important that you not ask about salary or benefits as one of your engaging questions. That's something that should be reserved for when you have a job offer. The only exception is when they directly ask you in the interview, what are your salary expectations? It's to your advantage to have a salary range that is lined up with what that position would normally pay someone with your background and experience. Don't rely on what you've earned before, because that may just be really different as you enter a whole new professional phase of your life. BridgeLab can help you with this sort of negotiation process, so keep that in mind. So a couple engaging questions, examples, is what might a typical workday look like if I were to be working at your company? How do you see my skills and experiences lining up with what your expectations are for the job? And what kind of problems do you think this company will be experiencing in the next few years? I'm sure you can think of some more, but those are engaging questions that they're not going to be able to quickly answer. They'll have to think about it. They may even have to collaborate if it's a team on how to best answer your questions. There's something to be said about asking for the next steps. When will I be hearing from you is a perfectly reasonable question to ask. And I think, even though this is sort of a bold move, to say, I've really enjoyed meeting you all, and I look forward to the next steps. I'm excited about the position, and I'd be really pleased to go to work for you. I mean, it sounds very simple, but you're essentially asking for the job. As soon as you get landed after the interview, craft some personal email thank you notes to the interviewers if you can possibly get their email addresses. You'll probably have someone in HR who could also forward them, or you can figure out a way to get that information. But a personal note saying, I really appreciate your question about this, or I really find this aspect of the company so interesting. It was really exciting to hear about it, will help you be memorable to this selection committee. If you want to practice interviews, please contact BridgeLab. Lee and I are ready to work with you and set up a session. Good luck and be safe, and let us know how we can help. We really appreciate you. Bye.